Hello, my friends. Welcome to another Masterclass. I'm Dr. Aaron Sheley. Coursera uses this for credits at USC, Calarts, and Harvard. In Calarts and USC terms, it's for film school, basically, that you need it for, though it can be an elective either way. What you do to audit the class is you listen and you hear everything that's said in class. And then when the time comes to take the final test, and all of these classes have final tests, Coursera will grade you. I can grade you. There's other, but really I can only grade you if I know you. But I do help them with the grading. We used to do that all the time. Now they can kind of do it just by computer. And they're always telling us not to write articles by the computer, but they grade us by computer. No, I'm teasing. It's cool because I don't use the computer to write my articles, but I use the computer to do pretty much else. Everything, especially be something I type my articles on. Because, see, without a computer, I wouldn't be able to just type my name on a computer. Because then you're without a computer. Now, let's get serious. This is class. It's the 11th Quentin Tarantino Auteur class I've taught. And so far, it seems like it all went fast, but there's still quite a ways to go. So hang in there. If you think it's over already, we have a lot to talk about. One thing I wanted to talk about in terms of Tarantino is his style of making movies and what it really is. Mostly not just asynchronous and the music's told out of sequence and the movie's told out of sequence like Godard would often do, like from Breathless to Pure Le Fou, switch back and forth between genres. That Tarantino is very Scorsese and very De Palma in his violence and hard-hitting aesthetics of violence. That those guys are Hitchcockian, and you got to admit, Hitchcock definitely could have made a stand on the original Inglourious Bastards by date, and he liked blaxploitation too. But that Inglourious Bastards comes as another exploitation film is weird because it's so highbrow, and then it's so highbrow is really like we're showing the worst side of man, but yet we're not saying that's because he's highbrow that he's a bad person. He just ended up becoming a bad person and blew his own theater up. And by the time you get to that point, you're like, okay, so the Inglourious Bastards won, but this guy took a pot shot at the Germans. Well, I like that Inglourious Bastards is one of those movies that still has the Nazis as evil. I don't necessarily say that Tarantino has to always be the barometer on what race, class, and genderism even is. So they're always criticizing him for ignoring those rules to NYU. But that some of it is him being unpolitically correct on purpose doesn't offend me. Because I'm like, sometimes you do something someone tells you not to do just because they tell you not to do it. And everybody has that psychology. They're like, I'm going to do that because they told me not to. Here we go. And I'm not playing psychologist or anything. I'm just saying one of the stylistics to a Tarantino movie is you look at Dusk Till Dawn and Natural Born Killers. And you get these ideas of big scenes, montages, lifts of sequences going different parts of the movie. Big sequences added here. Like we got all these computers up and we're adding sequences to these. And then it's like there's so much footage of just there's this one version of Pulp Fiction where Bruce Willis goes back to get his gold watch. And I swear it's 45 minutes of the film was just him driving along, walking along. It was just Bruce Willis' typical day in L.A., going back to his house and getting his gold watch. So then he could leave forever to Las Vegas because right now there is no you and me. My students, there is a you and me. But I'm just saying, just focus on Pulp Fiction. Oh, and to all those who were worried, I do have my copy of Pulp Fiction back, but Jackie Brown and Reservoir Dogs went aloof. I'll keep you reported. Anyways, what I'm serious about this directing style is it's kind of like you take a whole canvas of wide extract, big shots that are outdoors. You do those first because you don't know what the weather will be like ever. Always do the outdoors ones first, unless you're expecting a certain change in the weather that you want to be in the movie, then you schedule around the outdoor weather. I mean, these were all things that Lloyd Kaufman reiterates in Make Your Own Damn Movie, and all I learned from making movies is from The Toxic Avenger. And he's the trauma president. And the reason these work is because they're age-old facets true of cinema, that if you film all your outdoor scenes first and you kind of loop them through the movie, then film all your indoor scenes, and the hardest of outdoor scene to the hardest an indoor scene is still going to hit you the easier side of the outdoors. But the indoor scenes go to the easiest indoor scene at the end. So that's, you got to kind of look through the scenes and see which ones are easier to shoot and put those off. Now, I'm not saying that's even how Tarantino works. Tarantino may have a whole other specific of filmmaking. I know Scorsese can see it in his head, or David Lynch can see it in his head, and it becomes exactly what he sees. He sees the movie in his head, and everything that comes to be about the movie, even done in little montages, he sees the whole thing, and then it becomes that. See, me, I'm usually like, myself as a filmmaker, and I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I usually only make movies that I'm making at the time and wondering how they'll look later, and in that way, it's when I'm making the movie, but I can sense myself making the movie. And most filmmakers are that way. But if you see it and it becomes a movie, then you're Martin Scorsese, you're Quentin Tarantino. I mean, now we don't know if Tarantino uses the meditation ideals that David Lynch uses to meditate and see something incessantly. But I think that one thing we don't give these movies enough credit for is, like, I mean, they have all these great stunt doubles, but what they really have is great production design. And that is because they go for that whole production design thing where you define the place a little exaggerated, expressionist style, but it's still the same place you'd have gone to. It's like what these dudes do in American Graffiti with the Burger House, that they'd all go, and it was like that Ron Howard show, Happy Days or something, where we all go to this restaurant and we all have fun when we're young. And, it's like these sudden sets that are like, have to be construed to see what's going to happen there. And I think that the point of that is, if Inglourious Bastards, another thing that's a movement is production design and pan shots. And that the takes are reliably longer because of the whole discussion in Jackie Brown. By the way, Jackie Brown is the one where Robert De Niro and Bridget Fonda are sitting on this chair, and De Niro's actually in that movie, and he plays against his type, and he always wanted to play every type there was, so he never really plays against type because, he always plays the type there was. But that he's in Jackie Brown is weird because you would expect him to even be the gimp in Pulp Fiction, like you never know. Because he's like one of those actors that seizes the day, gets in every film he can, and if they use his part or how he did it, which they often do, then he's in the movie. And that's not such a bad way of making movies. Now, forget you heard that. Because what the real point is that with Quentin Tarantino and Inglourious Bastards and all his other films, you have this set decoration that's A+, even for class, but that they're trying to hide things from these urban environments is just one thing. But that there's all these big sets and big put-together studios is really a tribute to how he seized control of the studio system, even if it's faltering a little bit. At that time, everybody's films were working out because Tarantino's films worked out. And in Jackie Brown, you have the same evidence. So De Niro's sitting there, and they're all smoking pot. And like, even Samuel L. Jackson takes a rip from the bong and doesn't even cough. Like, he ghosts it and doesn't even cough. And then, like everyone else, he's like, oh, so I see you're a couple of regular Cheech and Chongs. And then he and he's like, well, you don't get off till you cough. He didn't say that, though. He's like, did you know? He's like, cough, go ahead. That's what you're supposed to do. It opens the capillaries and gets it to your bloodstream faster. Now, I'm not trying to do my best Samuel L. Jackson impersonation because mine would be shitty, and I never impersonate like someone that I could never in a billion years even like approach as like I'd be worthy to approach him. I'm a teacher about the movies he's in. This is a very small participle of the thing. I'm not like speaking on behalf of them. I'm speaking what I get from it. If they had this political ideal about all the movies from Pulp Fiction, from Reservoir Dogs to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, then I missed the political badge on that one. Because I'd have probably joined if there was a political badge to say, you have to do this as a filmmaker, I would have done that. But like, I don't remember there being any that was like, just do the best Tarantino you can, because Tarantino is so perfect in all that he did and still is, that he's become this ginormous superstar. And you can only speculate, what he eats or drinks, or if you're even supposed to know that, And as a person that's telling you this from a perspective on filmmaking, I don't really deruther the fact that there's no way to escape a big film like Pulp Fiction eventually got so big that it became the film forever of the 90s. And I think we can all agree that the 90s went well, and Pulp Fiction is our proof of that, because the proof that the decade went well is always in the movies, even if we don't watch movies from decades ago. And it's weird because these movies aren't from decades ago. Usually, when you teach a class on an auteur, it's like an established auteur. I'm establishing this as an auteur, but only for film study purposes, because this way, film students can say, like, well, he was postmodern and that he crafted big shots together that were from other movies, other ideas, other songs, but that he played it out in a self reflexive way because he's showing us that's how it's done is so overwhelming that it's a beautiful artwork. And you're like, the aesthetics of this are so pragmatic, because then the aesthetics go into how you're going to leash one scene and unleash another, you know. By the way, I just checked something on the time clock of this class, and it seems like in about 30 minutes, which isn't even the end of the class, I'm going to have that be one take. And then I'm going to put in a 10-minute outro so that you can have the last 10 minutes of the class. It looks like, again, I've run against my own mistake on that. And I'm not going to start over, because I feel that I can deal this out in 30 minutes, deal this out in 40 minutes, and come back with a second clip. It's just the nature of the beast on some of these live shots and on some of these like classes that are recorded live. This is recorded live. Like, nothing has been like added or subtracted. It's just a speech that I'm giving to you from Masterclass. I'm not reading anything, cue cards or anything. And you can kind of tell that with my like relaxed, over easy kind of every movie's good rationality. But if every movie's good, that doesn't mean some aren't the best, and that these are the best, that these are the masterpieces, that these are the ones that you don't even approach because you know they're way bigger than you. Even if you're like, have riches of grandeur, it wouldn't matter. Like, you're still nowhere near as good as this. And that's not really what they're trying to do as artists, because they're always looking for new art to blow their own mind. But it's just the thing with an established artist, as an auteur would be, a constructionist, as well as an objectivist in its self-reflexivity, that the theater blowing up in Inglourious Bastards is self-reflexivity. Because they're showing the process of a projection and a projector, and showing the process of that projector get destroyed. And then the movie ends pretty soon after that. There's a few hanger-oners after the theater blows up, but not really. The movie's pretty much over. And I like a movie, like, there's a movie, All Is Lost by Robert Redford. Oh my gosh, it is such a good movie. And there's sound effects through the whole thing, but he really doesn't talk when he's in this boat wreck and he has to flip his boat over. Now, I've been in some near boat wrecks, but like, All Is Lost is a real bad boat wreck that you can't live through, kind of. It's really hard to live through that. And I don't think Robert Redford was really said he'd ever been in one like that, because that would scare everybody. Then they'd think it was a really scary film if he'd been in a shipwreck and he kind of simulated a shipwreck. That's why it's sensitive what information you do or don't give away, no matter who it's from, just about the biographical or the scapegoated kind of pranks that one would say, like, this happened in the Tarantino movie that we didn't like. You know, and that all leads to the scare version of why I think that guy from the government, what was his name, Al Gore, and his wife used to rail against Tarantino and used to rail against Tupac. I don't think they've seen any of it. Because really, the movie Psycho is a little worse than even Pulp Fiction in terms of how aesthetically realistic and aesthetically like falsitude the hack and slash genre was born. Of Psycho, I don't really consider Pulp Fiction hack and slash genre, but a dude does get hacked and slashed up, so hear me out. That the hash and slash genre has to have more than one person getting hashed and slacked. Because otherwise, you just think it was a movie that had that as one of its rules. Okay, we got to have a hack and slash scene. But is a scene enough to be a movie? But this, I don't really, so I guess you can do it either way. If you said it's a hack and slash, Pulp Fiction's a hack and slash all the way through, you'd probably get Best Critic of the Year award from me, because that's what I wanted you to say. And I'm being really egotistical now with my 10 degrees, and there's more of them, but I'm just floating them around there to think. We have done this for 3 years, and we're just now getting into the classes everyone was excited about now to take. And now we're sitting here going, but has he gotten to the main event yet? And really, we haven't, because the main event for me years ago was Inglourious Bastards. I thought it was all going to end on that. I thought everything they were going to do is going to be like this is the last temptation of the cinema buff, you know. And that it's totally made like the old Inglourious Bastards and totally made like the ones that used to like Griffith, and how there were these Israelite Jewish guys that were practicing Kabbalah, which is a kind of Hebrew mysticism. And the Kabbalist guys were kind of around since the invention of the world. It has a lot to do with the later civilizations on Earth that dealt with them. And, you know, Christoph Waltz, he's straight out of like this Nazi sort of soil. That in Django Unchained, he plays the guy on the other side of the irons that's going to free Django, become his partner, and do whatever he asks because of some event that happened without us knowing in the film. And there was some event that happened between them where he was going to free Django specifically at the beginning of the movie. But Christoph Waltz in this one is trying to shoot children just because they're Jewish. And there's this Jewish girl hiding under the house, and he's about to blow it to smithereens. Now, I've seen that scene in some movies before, and it was so cool to see that scene done by Tarantino because he's got the language, the German guy speaking German, you know, the Italian guy speaking Italian. You know, it all adds up. The way he makes it surreal is by connecting these events with this production design that's kind of expressionistic. And by expressionistic, I don't mean exaggerated in a bad way. I mean, they'll exaggerate the bigness of it. That's been going around since even before Brazil, like where you kind of exaggerate in film. Like a lot of Casablanca, you see that film and how they exaggerate certain things and make it look bigger than it really is. Or like the building's bigger, or like the giant displays of Monaco were bigger, and you've got this whole thing about the bar being this legendary bar, you know. It's like when you want to make a movie, you want to make sure that the locale is so spine-tinglingly attractive to the eyes that even if something bad's going on there, we'll go straight to it as kind of an eye image going towards it. Like David Cronenberg does that a lot, where he'll put something in that's hard to look at, but you'll be so decked into like how the muted cinematography that you'll just be like, kind of like, yeah, I know that I saw this head explode on this movie, but like it was not even a big deal. Not because it wasn't gross, because it was gross. You know, now you're all talking mundane about Scanners. You know, like, Scanners was scary back in its day. That would be my old report on Masterclass, you know, and I used to just get on and be like, another word about Scanners is, I saw it again today and I'm still trembling. No, I don't think you guys remember when I used to teach with like a professor assistant license and then getting this masterclass. Oh, I'm sure that Tarantino and all he's done has done way more than I ever will. Getting this masterclass, let alone convincing the powers that be that it's going to work, that we're going to deal with it as a class, it hasn't been easy, but it's been the ride of a lifetime. So hear me out. The funny thing about that is masterclass, when they hired me for life. Now, I don't know if we're always going to be sitting around and discussing the same topics, because it's things that get you extra points on your report card, and I've only really taught like 4 or 5 different topics to a class. So my disadvantage is not for being able to teach 2 classes a week, but I still do usually get 2 of these in a week, and the last one was 4 days ago, and we know we're on 11, and I'm not trying to go fast, but if there's something else we have to say about Inglourious Bastards, we'll do it later, because there's a whole thing about the Pandora's box nature of it. Not like the movie, but like the myth, where like there's something in the box, and when it opens, it explodes and kills everyone. It's like they put a bomb under your seat, like Hitchcock would, and told you they don't know when it's going to go off. So it could be boom, right away. That it was the Kabbalah dudes from the Jewish race, and the Jews do have a really powerful army, for one thing, and this explains why they weren't always there. They were fighting all over the world when the Holocaust was taken in, which I think is a point that we don't want to miss, because there really were these freedom fighters for the Jewish people, and they really did get supported by America. Whatever American anti-Semitism there is, we've always supported Jewish soldiers as we've supported soldiers of every race. Soldiery is not looked down upon. in America like it is in other places. If you join soldiery for any reason and you're stable enough to, then you can. And so they really had these special op groups. My cousin Evan was telling me, he was like, yeah, well, the Inglourious Bastards is a true story because they really had this, group of Jewish soldiers that fought all these battles and then came back to fight the Battle of Hitler. And that's how some of the books look. And our nation is really minimal because the Holocaust was so raunchy, and that the Holocaust was raunchy, yeah. Was it the raunchiest thing that ever happened in human history? Probably, yeah. But was it something that you'd want to hang over someone's head because they were at war anyway? I don't see, but then that this movie takes the unpolitically correct and totally at that time has switched around from it used to be, and it says, haha, the Nazis are bad in this one. Because if he would have done it a different way, he'd be like finding out there were really people that wanted Nazis to take over the earth or something, and then he blew them up, and then he'd be laughing. But like Tarantino to me is kind of go against the grain, like make it huge, David Lean style, but really get it on those close-ups, and not just necessarily POV close-ups, but close-ups of the eyes, cerebral, like objective correlatives, like a burger getting picked up in a close-up shot, and then back to the establishing shot in Pulp Fiction. And there's this thing about food that looks really good. There's this whole thing later in Inglourious Bastards where the lead actress, she's being fed like this German tart type thing, and it's like cherry tart or something, and it looks pretty good, right? But like that she's about to get captured and killed, and it's just her last request to have this tart, and it's been sprayed with whipped cream or whatever, and it's like the Germans have this great dish. It kind of goes how I've been saying lately that I'm not really upset with the Germans anymore, not just because I'm part German, but I'm not really upset with the Germans anymore. But I thought it was cool that Hitler was the bad guy in that one, because really, like, the only one where he's not is Das Boot, and everyone's okay with Das Boot because it's so safe in the way that they just blow up everything in the world and become the biggest nation of the world. And, sometimes I think back to conversations I've had with actual people, and a friend of mine or a friend of a friend of a friend told me one time that, like, there's certain German directors, and we won't name names, but that really like me because they know deep down I'm probably the only dude that forgives for everything, is what they say, because I forgave the Germans for the Holocaust. I went to Germany and forgave the Germans for the Holocaust, and most of them wanted forgiveness for it. But that doesn't make me a non-Holocaust supporter. I think the Holocaust is important to support. People brought to life, people find their ancestors, people find who they're looking for. And yeah, Hitler was the villain. He didn't start the war. The Holocaust wasn't totally his fault. Until the killing of them all at the end, more Germans died. And I'm not just trying to give Germans pride again. It just seems like they're always getting knocked down in this. I'm not saying this is a fold to Inglourious Bastards, because Inglourious Bastards is the Jews from Judith of Bethulia basically coming after these guys with scalping them. And everybody wants to see a Nazi scalp. And I hope that Inglourious Bastards is remembered forever as the anti-Nazi movie that totally worked. And most of them do. But don't forget, some of these German directors out there weren't offended by Inglourious Bastards because they make more offensive movies, even about Germany. And that there's been a certain respect in German filmmakers to just say, well, Tarantino, Spielberg, they're good directors. We like them a lot. They're the best ones. But they're like, now I'm going to go make a movie, and they had no idea that in America they were taken so seriously, because you're like, yeah, if they're here in Germany, I just want them to know I forgive them personally for the Holocaust. And I wasn't just showing off, because someone had told me, my godfather or something had told me to forgive the Germans of the Holocaust. He's like, no one else ever has, but you can. And say it when you spray it, like, tell us all that you forgive the Germans, because so many of my back readings have seemed like so intensely anti-German because I so sided with the Jewish race. And I so sided with the Jewish race mostly not because of religion anymore, but just having certain aspects of Judaism follow me around, not just Kabbalism for the mysticism of being a professor, but there's other things you do that are like commonplace that are in honor of the Jews, and that Jews make good movies. I'm not going to go through all the things they do good and bad at. Who knows? But I had an anti-Semitic grandma, whatever. You know, like she passed away. It was on a, you know, but I'm not going to go around smearing her name through the woods. I'm just saying I'm not like getting on here and catching a bigger Tarantino political spectrum. He does like to play a lot of jokes on people by doing the things he said he wouldn't do, like put the N word in his movie. And it wasn't because it was on his loyalty. It was because he really, really needed to make somebody mad in his movie. Like he had to get the guy off his back. You know, movie guys, they'll be like both ways on that. You're like, half of them will be pushing you to do it, and half of them will be pushing you not to do it. So he does it in a way that everybody gets fucked. And, you know, but like nowadays, those kind of rudimentary guerrilla filmmaking skills were good in El Mariachi, right? They're still good in Planet Terror and all that. But the Inglourious Basterds tries to be a little more serious. It's not that it's this cartoon version of the Christoph Waltz, because he's never cartoonish really. There's a comic book sense there, but I'm not mentioning cartoonish because that seems more childish. I'm saying comic bookish, that like the page flips and you're on the next part. It may be some flashback, it may be some other scene. You know, as soon as you're out of the scenography of one part on a comic book, you're in the scenography of the next, and that's kind of the mise en scène and montage that's cycling back and forth. And Tarantino uses heavy montage, like in Kill Bill, the sequence with Rin Ishii. You know, she kicks butt through this montage of cartoons. She kicks butt through this montage of like everyday life. Then there's kind of this montage of the sword fight that Uma Thurman has against her. All right, so I'm not going to quite call this off yet because we've got about 25 more minutes to go in class. It's about how far we are. And I don't want you to get lost on the subject, because there's an important thing about saying that, like, look, if you want me to apologize, I will, because I'm sorry that I got so mad at a race of people for killing a race of people, because then I'm like, two wrongs don't make it right. And I also don't need to look at it that way, because there must be some success found for those persecuted in other countries. That our country does have a lot of races that I won't bring up that are persecuted constantly. I just won't bring that up. But I'm just saying, well, you know, this whole thing with Django Unchained is, again, something I agree with even more than Inglourious Basterds, because I love the whole idea of a film where they all go to kill Hitler. I mean, I love the idea of that film, going back to what I was saying originally, because really the idea of like capturing the World War II footage of the news on the march is saying, we're all going in big planes to kill Hitler. We don't know what he did wrong, but the American government's pissed. D.W. Griffith has PTSD, whatever, we're going in, and D.W. Griffith's coming with us, and we're all going to go blow up Berlin. And then you see the desolation that causes in Berlin Year Zero, and you're like, you know, they lost it all too. It's gone. It's this pile of rubble. And so really, with Inglourious Basterds, is a good one, because they're not necessarily saying, even with Christoph Waltz throwing the bomb in the theater was the best idea, especially with G.W. Pabst and Lena Riefenstahl in there, and they weren't that bad of filmmakers. They could have been absolved from the whole gory mess of it too, even by the Jews, who would absolve someone from the whole gory mess by saying, you know, they were good filmmakers in their own right. They made money as filmmakers. We should go back in time and say the Germans were right, but don't let this counterbalance my theory. The haphazard blowing up of Berlin was so the end of World War II, because Germany was the only country of the Axis powers that was doing any good anymore, because Japan had been assaulted and Japan was about to get hit by the nuclear bomb. And nobody can figure out that the nuclear bomb and the Destroy Berlin thing were kind of around the same week. And I don't think that everyone destroy the place is bad or good, because on the one hand, well, I think it's bad because we don't want Berlin destroyed. It's the nicest city. It's one of the nicest places on earth. But if the American government says they have to destroy Berlin because they're not giving up Hitler or something, well, he wasn't the only one behind the Holocaust. There's a lot I could say. But what I'm not saying is to disavow Inglourious Basterds just because the Germans are showed bad, because actually it could be one of those things where they were going to show the Germans bad, like having all these evil Germans, and just make it that way, like, which later they're parodying in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But like, kind of like making them the sinister ones for once. But even in the movies, like Pink Panther and shit, they're always making the guys look like they're look like they're the evil Nazi, and they really aren't. You know, the Nazi with a heart of gold. Well, I don't think he had a heart of gold. That his mind gets warped by the Inglorious Bastards smacking around. That's probably my most logical explanation for why he'd gone giddy batshit crazy. But we all know Christoph Waltz knew ahead of time, as a real person, knew ahead of time he was going to have to sink into the abyss of insanity. And I'm sure someone talked to him about, like, let's not make the Germans so rigidly evil, it'll make us seem like we have a comment on racism. And Tarantino's probably like, that's commentary on racism. We got to keep it in. I mean, that's how it goes with most filmmakers. They're looking at it like, well, if all my films have this, then that's what they want. But all of his films have something that he may not know. And that is a sort of cherry red glow of Rebel Without a Cause or The Great Escape combined. Because it's like the two Hollywood classical movies that decide his color palette, whether he moves faster or slower, is almost like David Lean when he would record a big red wall. In Dr. Zhivago, it looks like how Tarantino always has this painterly approach, like he's painting on the scenes, which goes back to that thing I was saying where directors will see it and they'll see it in the film. Well, he walks up on the set and paints it, and they appear, and it's like he leaves a little insert key for the audience to add paint to it. And it doesn't work the way where you can't add paint to it, because it feels like you're inventing it while you're watching it. And that's kind of a postmodern auteur thing, is to make them think that they're coming up with the ideas by the way you worded the ideas. Oh, I came up with that a long time ago. Wait, they just said it in the movie. It's like that argument. So, I've got 20 more minutes of class. I've got to take off for about 10 minutes because I had some unexpected technical difficulties. Basically, I forgot to wind my clock back in my phone. So it's going to ring off in a minute. So I'll talk more about Django Unchained in a few minutes.